Tonight on Talking Politics, the Boston City Council voted to lower the voting age to 16 for city elections this week. But it is by no means a done deal. I'll talk to one of the driving forces behind the measure, City Councilor Julia Mejia, along with a recent BPS grad who worked with Mejia on the legislation. First, though, he rarely used his pardon power in his first 7 years in office, but in his final months, Governor Charlie Baker's making up for lost time. His latest recommendation, Gerald Amaral and his sister Cheryl Amaral Lefebvre, who were convicted in a controversial child abuse case back in 1986. The pair ran a daycare in Malden called Fells Acres, where they were accused of molesting several children. But the Amarals and others, including a Superior Court judge, questioned the methods police used, which they felt prompted the children to make those accusations. On the other hand, Baker's successor, Maura Healey, steering clear of controversy and some argue transparency as she transitions into the governor's office. Among those calling for more clarity, Boston Globe columnist Joan Vennochi, who is urging the governor-elect to, quote, end the mystery and tell us what she has in mind for Massachusetts. Joan joins me now along with GBH News politics editor Peter Kadzis. Good to see you both. So, Joan, what is there looming about Maura Healey and how she'll govern that we don't know that you believe we should?
Well, that's a good question. I've been sort of pondering it since I filed the column. Well, if you talk about details, we don't know who her chief of staff will be. We don't hear any buzz about who might serve in the cabinet. What's she going to do about taxes? She hasn't said. She says affordable housing is a priority, but she hasn't really talked policy. And, you know, same with the T. It's a priority, but we don't know what she's going to do. But I think really it's less about details and more about that she really hasn't started a conversation with the voters of Massachusetts. Usually a candidate does that during a campaign, but there was no campaign. So I think what's kind of lacking is just, you know, a sense that she's talking to us and giving us some insight into where she's heading and the direction that she's wants to bring Massachusetts.
Let me ask you, my guess is that we're going to have some Healey super fans watching who are going to say, wait a minute, Joan said we don't know what she's going to do on taxes. We know that she backed question 1, which succeeded and is going to make taxation more progressive in Massachusetts. We also know that she's backed Governor Baker's sort of broad suite of tax cut proposals. We know she's got a child tax cut proposal right there on her website that's pretty detailed. What would you say to people who say, hold on, there she has offered detail. You can go online and find out her plan for transportation, for example.
Well, I don't think most people go online. They didn't go online during the campaign, I'm guessing, except for the diehard, you know, political junkies, and I doubt they're doing that now. I'm just sort of talking, she's been much more of a presence since the Royals hit Boston than since election night. I mean, suddenly, you know, she's courtside with Kate and William, but I just feel like she won and then she kind of disappeared. And maybe I have a short memory, and it was the same when Baker won back in 2014 and when Deval Patrick won. But I just feel like there's kind of a lack of communication and just a lack of conversation. And I hear that from other people around town, and maybe we're expecting something that in January she'll start talking, and you know we'll complain that she's talking too much.
Peter Kadzis, do you have the same sense of absence or detachment that Joan does when it comes to the governor-elect?
I do have the same sense, but I'm not surprised. First of all, as Attorney General, her press operation was very tight-lipped. I mean, it almost made Governor Baker seem garrulous. And if anyone who's ever dealt with him know, Baker had a zip-your-lip policy about talking to the press. So I think we can expect a lot of that from Maura Healey. The other thing is, I don't see any political advantage. Now, I'm not disagreeing with Joan. She's really said little about little since being elected, but I don't see the advantage for her. She's in a different position dealing with the Democratic legislature, and I think she needs to get a real read of who's going to be pushing for what up on Beacon Hill, because curiously enough, a Democratic governor, I think, has less room to maneuver with the Democratic legislature
Why do you
than
say
the
that?
Republican. I say that because a Republican, let's specifically Charlie Baker, he was elected to oppose the legislature.
Right. So the relationship's pre-established by dint of his election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's plenty of time for it to come out. We'll see.
Sticking with Maura Healey for just a moment, Peter, she announced her transition team.
Yeah.
A pretty big group, a lot of familiar names. I'm wondering if any of the people who she's appointed to look at various issues during the transition period, any names jump out at you?
Well, none. I'm sure there are some surprises in there that I didn't guess. I mean, by my count, it's about 210 people.
Plenty of people, yeah.
And representing all shades of opinion from center left to center right, heavy on labor. Yeah, there are a couple of hints as to people who might be named to her administration. Senator Eric Lesser, who would run for lieutenant governor. Benjamin Downing, the progressive, who would run for governor. Danielle Allen. I don't see her going into the administration, but she'll probably be offering advice. And City Councilor Matt O'Malley, big environmentalist. I mean, those are names that I wouldn't be surprised to see. But as Joan points out, we don't have enough information to judge.
Joan, I had the same reaction as Peter when I saw the list. I read through it a couple times and I thought, well, nothing jumps out as shocking here to me. Did you, when it comes to reading the tea leaves heading into a Healey administration, did you glean anything from her picks?
Well, I didn't see anything shocking, but to me, you know, the most important name is the chair, Kim Driscoll, who's, you know, the lieutenant governor-elect. And again, you know, around town, people seem to think that Kim Driscoll is going to play a very important role in the Healey administration. And I think that's kind of interesting because not since Weld Cellucci back in the 90s has anybody really thought that a lieutenant governor has a chance to play that big a role. I think it's because she's a mayor. You know, she has an executive position. She knows how to run something. And there's an expectation that that will translate into being a really good partner for Maura Healey. So that's just kind of rumor and speculation. But to me, the Kim Driscoll is the key player.
And there were a lot of mayors among those 200 plus people.
I had missed that.
I think Jonas, maybe she'll be the Dick Cheney of the Healey administration.
You heard it here first. I love that comparison. I'm sure she'll love it too. Joan, the man that Maura Healey is going to be replacing, Charlie Baker, made headlines, as we mentioned, for announcing that he's going to seek pardons in the Fells Acres case. I'm wondering if, for anyone who's watching who needs a refresher or might not be familiar with this story, why is Baker's decision here so controversial?
With the Fells Acres case?
With the Fells Acres pardons, yeah.
Well, the case has been controversial for 40 years and it's always been a political lightning rod in terms of who do you believe, the victims who were children who said they were sexually abused, or the accused predators who were found guilty and, you know, served time in jail for, you know, child abuse. Baker has done what no governor has done before, and he's chosen a side, and the side he chose is, you know, he's siding with the accused predator and wanting to pardon them. He did it without reaching out to the victims, which I think was a mistake.
Peter, I was going to ask you about that decision of the governors to not reach out with the victims prior to announcing he was going to seek these pardons. Leaving that aside, since Joan has mentioned it, what's your take on the merits of his decision here? I
think the governor did the right thing. You go back 40 years, and Governor-elect Paul Cellucci had real questions about how guilty they were. Dorothy Rabinowitz, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, won a Pulitzer Prize for a series of columns collected in this book that... No Crueler Tyrannies. I have not read it, but I will take a look. Punctures the myth of the prosecution, how the kids in the Emerald case were coached by the prosecution team until they gave the answers they wanted. It's a it was a horrific set of crimes, a horrific situation, but it was not unlike the Salem witch trial. And this happened all over the United States, not just here. And there's an interesting dichotomy. Not only did Cellucci doubt the evidence was there, but it was prosecuted by Democrats, by Scott Harshbarger and then later former Attorney General.
Martha Coakley.
Martha Coakley, sorry, thank you. So there, if you go really deep into the weeds, you have a Democratic-Republican split on this, too.
Yeah. I should note, and this is obviously incredibly complex, we can't unpack it all here, but I should note that the Globe reported that the victims, or I think we can say victims since there was a conviction, that they still, at least the ones quoted by your paper, Joan, they say, no, this happened to me. I was victimized in this way, and I will never change my take on that. So incredibly complicated topic. I'm glad you brought up the political subtext, and this is something I've heard about for decades, ever since moving here. So, Joan, I want to ask you about another column you wrote this week, a column I really enjoyed, noting that former governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, who now, of course, is the senator from Utah, is not the man that he was when he was running this state or when he stepped down as governor. Besides being based in Utah, what's the big evolution that you see when it comes to Romney?
Well, he was one of 12 Republican senators who voted to protect same-sex and also interracial marriage. And on the same-sex issue, I mean, that is a huge evolution for Mitt Romney. When he ran for governor back in, I guess, 1992, not 1990, I'm sorry, 2002. I'm having a
That's okay.
little
they all blur together.
Like Peter there. 2002. He, was very strong in his position in saying that marriage was between a man and a woman, and he took the same position when he was running for president. And to take that vote, I think is a pretty big change of, I don't know if it's a change of heart because one never knows with Mitt Romney, but it's definitely a change of position. And I think on the right side of history.
Peter, Governor Romney has also been a really vocal critic of Donald Trump over the years. I want to just roll a little bit of him talking to a reporter this past week about Trump's dinner with the anti-Semite and white supremacist Nick Fuentes. Let's take a look.
I think it's disgusting to invite people like that to meet with a former president of the United States. I think it's been clear that there's no bottom to the degree to which President Trump will degrade himself and the nation.
Romney went on to say he doesn't think Trump should be president of the United States again. He doesn't think he should be the nominee of the party, and he doesn't want him, quote, hanging over our party like a gargoyle. In this late stage of Mitt Romney's career, what do you make of his evolution? Well,
I can look at it from 2 points of view. His opposition to Trump, I think, is it's a rare instance of the Constitution operating as the founders thought it might or should operate. Senators were given 6-year terms to let them rise above the hurly-burly of daily politics.
Yeah, good point.
And in regards to Trump, Senator Romney has done that repeatedly. When it comes to same-sex marriage, I would like to think, like Joan, that he rose above it here. But that was also politically expedient. In Arizona, the 4 congressmen the 4 congressmen all voted in favor of same-sex marriage. So, Romney's in line with that. But I would like to think there's the high concept at work here.
Before we wrap up, I got to do a lightning round here with the two of you and get your take on the royal visit that every media outlet seemingly in the Boston area has been covering extensively, including GBH News, the Boston Globe, and several others. When Prince William and Princess Kate, I think I have to call them that even though I'm not English or UK citizen, when they arrived at Greentown Labs in Somerville, there was a crowd there cheering for them. I think we may have a little bit of video that we can roll, but not everyone was thrilled to see them. Joan, the Globe had an article talking about people who are kind of cranky. One person saying it was a bad day to go to Market Basket. The traffic was going to be terrible. I find myself siding much more with the disgruntled would-be market basket shopper, wondering what all the fuss is about here. Is there anything in this visit for the city of Boston and Massachusetts as a whole, do you think, Joan?
Well, they also rebooted the Celtics game, I think.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I read that. Well, I've been reading all the coverage, so clearly, the media is onto something.
Yeah, I've been hate reading it too.
No matter how cynical we may be, I'm reading it and seeing what outfit she's wearing and all that. I kind of think it makes Boston look a little bit provincial. I don't know if they went to LA or New York, they would get quite the same, just sweeping gaga coverage. But hey, it's a good distraction, and it's something to think about other than Maura Healey's transition.
Peter, unlike me and unlike Joan, you're a Boston native. Do you think it makes the city of your birth look provincial to get this excited?
I don't think it makes it look provincial. I'll tell you, I see this very simple. It's good for tourism. Tourism is a major industry in the state. It's hurting in Boston. It's a major industry here. It's good for tourism, period.
All right, that's a good point. Actually, I guess it could even be good for the renewable energy sector if people think of Boston because of this visit as a place that is notable in that regard, maybe?
That's GBH high-minded thinking.
That's me.
I'm not so sure. I just think it's good for tourism in general.
Okay, Peter Kadzis, Joan Vennochi, thank you both. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye, Joan.
Thanks.
Next up, in an overwhelming 9-4 vote Wednesday, the Boston City Council passed a measure to lower the voting age to 16 for municipal elections.
This particular home rule petition is really an opportunity for us as a city to create space for youth not to only be seen and heard, but to validate them through empowering them to vote and make decisions for themselves.
But the council doesn't actually hold the power to make this kind of change. So even if it's approved by Mayor Wu, this proposal, known as a home rule petition, will go to the State House, where it will need to pass in the legislature and then get a signature from the governor before it can take effect. It's an effort a number of other cities and towns have tried in years past, including Somerville, Lowell, and Cambridge, only to end up stalled out on Beacon Hill. I'm joined now by one of the measure's co-sponsors, the one we just heard from, Councilor Julia Mejia, and Nesaj Ware, a recent Boston Public Schools graduate who worked as a youth liaison in Councilor Mejia's office and helped work on the language of the petition. Thank you both for being here to talk this through. Councilor, let me start with you. Congratulations on the measure's passage. I know this has been a long time coming and that you've been working on it for a while. Is Mayor Wu going to sign the home rule petition?
I am very hopeful that she will. When she was on the council, she was supportive of this work that we had been doing. And so I am very encouraged and hopeful that she will be signing and it would be going off to the State House.
For people who are just catching up on this story, what is, from your vantage point, the biggest argument for making this change? My sense from watching the council's deliberations, reading some other coverage, is that there are different arguments and they're complementary to a large extent. But what do you see as the most important one?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to acknowledge that Nesaj and her peers worked collectively with our office. So I just want to uplift. It was the young people that were really leading this because in many spaces, they're organizing and doing the work without representation. And with so much at stake, creating opportunities to help build political muscle at an earlier age really changes the way communities of color engaged in electoral processes, right? So it takes 6 years to turn a non-voter into a super voter. And with civic education and with opportunities to be able to inform who is going to represent you, is going to inspire young people to be lifelong voters, which is what I believe is the pathway towards real democracy.
Nesaj, let me ask you about your history with this particular issue. Did you begin working on it when you were working as a youth liaison for Councilor Mejia, or did your involvement start prior to that?
It was actually prior to my involvement with Councilor Mejia. I worked for the Center of Teen Empowerment, where we talked a lot about initiatives surrounding lowering the voting age, and it's actually even an initiative that we worked on at the annual Youth Justice Rally that's hosted with I Have a Future.
Okay, so from your vantage point, since you're coming at this with a little bit of a different perspective than Councilor Mejia, what do you think the most important reason to make this change is? Is it the one that she mentioned, sort of a way to civically train young people, get them engaged for the long term, or is it something else?
I think I definitely echo everything Councilor Mejia said, but in addition to that, I would say, like she said in the beginning, it's kind of, we're already doing the work without representation. So I think it's giving young people a voice in government that they've already been fighting for. A lot of the time we're working in these social justice organizations and we're championing issues that we don't actually have the tools to impact change.
Councilor Mejia, the opponents of this measure were quiet in the council on Wednesday, but I know that in the past your colleague Erin Murphy has said she thinks 16-year-olds, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I think it's true to her sentiment, really aren't mature enough to vote and that they could be easily swayed by adults. Actually, let me quote her just to do justice to her argument. She says, "I've lived through raising 3 teenagers. I think they're full of wisdom and have lots of ideas and thoughts, but I also think they're very impressionable." What's your response to her critique or concern?
Yeah, no, I do appreciate my colleagues' remarks, but as someone who has worked with young people throughout my entire career, young people are often the ones who are educating their parents and their peers and their family members about what is at stake when it comes to elections. And so to say something like that, I find that to be somewhat of a bit offensive to young people and also minimizing their ability to think for themselves. And I know that there are even some adults nowadays that are impressionable, right? They don't even know who is even on the ballot. You know how many phone calls I get from folks saying, who should we vote for? I'm like, do your research, go online. But there are young people who already know everyone that's on the ballot. So to say that young people are not mature enough, to me, it just feels like it undermines their ability to be able to think for themselves when they're already working 2 to 3 jobs, paying taxes, have driver's licenses. They're acting already as adults. And we should really validate their efforts and give them the right to vote.
Nesaj, let me ask you for your reaction to that skepticism or hesitation, just a little bit differently than I asked Councilor Mejia. As the councilor mentions, you can work if you're 16, you're paying taxes if you're 16, and a lot of 16-year-olds are already civically engaged, even though they don't have the right to vote. But at the same time, there are certain things that we don't let people do until they hit 21. You can't buy alcohol until you're 21. I don't think you can buy tobacco in Massachusetts until you're 21. Why, to your mind, does voting belong in the category of things that we let people do when they hit 16, as opposed to the category of things that people can't do until 18, or maybe even, back in the day, it used to be 21 rather than 18. Why should voting be something that mid-teenagers can do?
So with voting, I think it's very specific to the fact that young people are most impacted by a lot of the policies. I know, especially, I can only speak for a young person in Boston, but a lot of the policies that City Council is putting together in Boston, young people are most affected by. So I think it's only right and just that we have a say in the issues or in the policies that are ultimately regulating our lives.
That makes sense. And it's probably worth mentioning, there are, I think, about a half dozen municipalities in the United States that do this. There's a whole bunch of countries that do it. In some of the cities and towns that do it here in the U.S., I believe some of them only let 16-year-olds vote in school elections. Some of them let them vote in all elections. Nesaj, since you've worked on this issue for a while, is there anything in the experience of the municipalities that do it here in the U.S. or the countries that do it elsewhere in the world? I think everyone from, if I'm getting it right, Ecuador, Brazil, Austria, Scotland. Your colleague, Councillor Kenzie Bach, Councillor Mejia mentioned Scotland let people vote at 16 and 17 in the Scottish independence referendum. Are there any experiences from elsewhere in the U.S. or from overseas that should inform the way we think about this? Nesaj.
I think it's important to kind of use their practices to see what elections are teenagers, permitted to vote in, and definitely adapt them, but improve them, because obviously these systems aren't perfect because young people are still being stifled and our voices are still being suppressed. So I would definitely say adapting those practices and then just improving them to make sure that they work for our respective cities.
Councillor Mejia, is there anything we can see from other places that have done this that might convince people this is a good idea? Can we identify any shifts that have occurred once this change has been rolled out?
Yeah, so we know in the example of of Scotland. We actually had someone Zoom in during one of our working sessions, and they noted a dramatic increase in voter participation and engagement. So we do know that those efforts are paying the return on investment when we create space for young people to actually vote. So there is already data that supports this as something that we should support here in the city of Boston. But what I'm really concerned about, I mean, I don't want to, hijack your
No. You should. That's you're one of the most important ways to do it.
I am. I'm going to switch it up really quick.
No, that's good.
What I really find to be concerning is that, we have worked on this, and I know other municipalities across the state have tried, but then it goes to the State House where everything sometimes just dies, right? It's dead on arrival oftentimes. And I'm just really curious to hear and learn from my colleagues across the state what has been the feedback that they've received, and how can we seize this moment to organize young people across the state to say, we're going to get this passed.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I wanted to get there, but I was taking too long to get there. When I watched the council meeting, no, that's great. The council meeting on Wednesday, that was when my ears really pricked up, was when you said in your speech prior to the vote, these things tend to go to the State House to die, and I want everyone at the State House to know we're coming for them once it gets to Beacon Hill. So it sounded to me like you are eager to be part of assembling a movement that would make this a reality. How would you go about doing that? What might that entail?
So I'm just going to be honest. What I'm going to do is what I do all the time, is I'm going to step to the side and let those who are living the realities and doing the work lead. So that means young people. The young people are the ones who are going to have to organize. I'm just going to be there to, rally them up and get them through this process. But I think it's going to have to be young people leading this effort. Work organizing with the municipalities that have already tried, getting some more young people involved in this. Because look, we saw what Ed Markey was able to do. That was young people that got him to that post, right? We know the power of youth is strong. And I think that tapping into that energy and mobilizing young people so that they can go to the State House and say, we deserve the right to vote, let us do it. I think that's going to be a game changer.
Nesaj, really briefly, I know that you're a college student now. I believe you go to Howard, but could you see yourself being part of a sustained campaign like the one Councilor Mejia is describing?
Yes, most definitely. And just to even add to that, I admire Councilor Mejia because she's always served as the voice for young people, but I think it's a shame that she even has to do that, seeing that young people should have their own voice. So it's like we always have to go to an adult, somebody with the rights to do what we want to do. And I think this is another important reason for why we should be able to vote, so that we don't always have to kind of go through a pipeline and be able to just enact the change ourselves.
Nesaj, thank you for getting that in. Councilor Julia Mejia, Nesaj Ware, appreciate you being here. That's it for tonight, but do come back next week. And as always, tell us what you think. The email's talkingpolitics@wgbh.org. The website's gbhnews.org/talkingpolitics, or you can find me on Twitter. I'm @ReillyAdam. For now, thank you for watching and good night.